May she rest in pieces.
All right, we are live again. This is going to be the IPS Evening Deprogram for June 8th, 2025. If you were just with us, we were live with Fakeologist, and I deleted that video, but you can get it at fakeotube.com. And I'll make sure I put a link tonight, and maybe I'll put the audio. No, I'm going to leave it on his site. I think we want to drive traffic there. And we were kind of doing a catch-up because he's been offline, or he's been busy with other things for the last couple of weeks, he said. So I caught him up on the Musk-Trump breakup, which he heard about. Los Angeles, Trump sending the troops, that story. The build-up to 6/11. The Sandy Hook verdict being overturned. And the Pentagon admitting that they made up UFOs. They made up the base in Area 51. The Pentagon made it all up. In order, they say they lied about it in order to distract the public or disinform them, or there any eyewitness testimony regarding certain craft, experimental craft. So they're trying to conceal secret technology by sowing the field of disinformation. So if you see something, you're going to interpret it as coming from Mars or Venus instead of some advanced craft. So for national security reasons, which it makes sense as an explanation, but I think it's actually deeper than that. I think it's a little more nefarious, that they want people to be superstitious and they want you to believe in absurdities like aliens. Because if you're in this new scientific paradigm, the Church of Nasatology, you don't believe in angels. It's not scientific, but you'll believe in aliens. Checks off the same box. So ultimately, it's just revealing that at a minimum, whatever you take away from it, the Pentagon admits that they have the capacity to, and they have done, in this instance, they've actually accomplished it, to lie to people about something for decades, to influence public opinion and culture. Think about how many comics, movies, and video games and books came out of this notion of alien bases in Area 51. X-Files, for example. And that all came out of the Pentagon. It kind of says something about my general statement about psychological warfare and about how entertainment is more or less a military operation. It's a psy-war operation. I mean, we're talking about like a mainstay of science fiction, and a huge part of all the video games is UFOs, alien invasions. And you're saying, or they're saying, that a lot of the things that people believe in UFO-ology, it's not an ology, but the ufology community, yeah, it's government propaganda. I don't know how the people who believe that stuff are going to handle this. How are they going to cope? The guy from the documentary that I referenced before, Mirageman, because I've been talking about this for a long time, now they admit it, but Mirageman is about this. And the target of their misinformation campaign went crazy. He had to be committed. He couldn't reconcile the fact that he had built his life around a belief system, he had conferences, and he was actually serving as a honeypot, allowing the U.S. Air Force to find out anybody who's seen anything, and then meet them in these conferences. Janky Frames cover says, in the new Final Destination, the family's playing a giant Jenga, and it cuts to the schematic of an airplane. I don't remember that part, but I remember the Jenga. But I'm glad you bring this up, because Leave the World Behind, they were also playing that. And in Leave the World Behind, as they're playing this, drones fly over, dropping pamphlets that say "Death to America." So you have the drone sounds like an airplane. So you have the airplane sounds, "Death to America" in Arabic, and the Jenga tower falling. So now they include the Jenga tower again in this Final Destination, and to me it's 9/11 symbolism. And the opening scene, you're experiencing 9/11 from the tower's perspective, the jumper's perspective. The Final Destination original movie from year 2000, you're experiencing 9/11 from the perspective of one of the planes, one of the passengers. So you see how they've tied these together. And if you put these together, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like a first person's perspective, POV, of that PSYOP. And they wove them together. In fact, I have some interesting stuff related to this, which we'll jump right into. I was just on with Fakeologist. If you get the newsletter, I meant to point this out. I created this cyberpunk-themed live notification graphic. It says live now, Fakeologist. This was made with Sora.tv. And I've found that Render Forest and other such sites are useless now. I mean, they can't compete. If you can conceptualize something, you can pretty much make it happen with effective prompting. And I've been relying heavily on Grok to really get these specific effects. But if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll see every day I'm sending out animations and stuff. When we started this channel, it was all crop and drop. Our memes were not animated, and it was basically just square pictures of faces superimposed over other things. So I like to stay cutting edge, even though I still like the crop and drop style. All right, let's get into my notes for the day. We were talking about Seattle, because 6/11's coming up, and I remember this movie called How It Ends, and we talked about the date. So back in 2020, and even 2021, I spent a lot of time talking about the date 7/13 as it relates to blackouts. The blackouts in Manhattan, in particular, the blackout in Manhattan in 1977, and then the blackouts in 2019. So 42 years apart to the date, July 13th, you have these historically significant blackouts. And the numerology, the numbers they put out there are what caught my attention. I'm looking at the Drudge, and it's like 42 years after these blackouts, same day, 42nd Street on, 42,000 people put in the dark. So I'm like, what's with all these 42s? And this is when I started mind mapping these stories and these numbers and how they tie these things together. But How It Ends is a film that came out on 7/13, and it's right on the cover, How It Ends. And it's about a seismic event off the west coast of the U.S. that has disrupted the electrical power and telecommunications. It says here, he flies from Seattle to visit his parents in Chicago when it happens. And the film was released on 7/13. Now, 7/13 was the date Trump was shot in Butler. And there's been this connection, a consistent connection between the Trump headshot situation and the Seattle destruction situation, the nuke scenario. These have been paired up. And Jurassic Liars always pairs these up. He's always talking 6/11, 8/4, referring to two distinct events. And we've been talking about how this has been a facet, a feature. For example, Butler, Pennsylvania, 42 miles from East Palestine, Ohio, which connects headshot with the toxic airborne event and the blackout scenario, as depicted in White Noise, that overlapped with Palestine, Ohio's disaster. So here we have a movie that comes out on 7/13, which happens to be 113 days from 11/3, which, again, the date 11/3 and 3/11, like all these other numbers, are dates that we notice because they draw attention to it. So I'm pointing out this connection here because this movie is about the destruction of Seattle or the world, but it starts in Seattle. And the movie has that date of Trump's head wound. So again, I'm just pointing out the consistency here. Now, someone sent me this note about how in the new Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, he's carrying a sign that has the date 6/11 on it. Shout out to Cupstar. Thank you for supplying this in the Discord server. By the way, if you're a Blue Wrench Lodge member of the YouTube channel, go to posts and you can get a link to the Discord server. So here's Tom Cruise, and in the background you have 6/11/18. The camera pans Tom Cruise to keep the sign in the shot for a second or two. I see it. 6/11. So this had me thinking about Oblivion. If you remember Oblivion, it's a science fiction with Tom Cruise, and a little bit about that. One, there's an Elvis bobblehead. If you remember in Oblivion, it's mostly bland. It's the sterile environment, a spaceship. The world's just it's been nuked, so there's like really featureless. It's a featureless movie, but Elvis is on the dashboard. An Elvis bobblehead in Oblivion. Tom Cruise's character keeps Elvis, referred to as Bob, on the dashboard. This prop serves as a nostalgic connection to humanity's past. So again, this is just a little side note, but in Oblivion, there's the post-nuke apocalypse scene in the football stadium where he has a dog shows up, kind of a reference to a boy and his dog. But anyway, this is just another reference with Tom Cruise and this post-nuke apocalypse scenario with Elvis thrown in for good measure. But the 611 thing right there. And something else came up today. This was a fascinating find. Synchromorpheus had looked into the actress that plays the prophet in Final Destination. So if you remember, there's the girl who has the prophecy and who believes the Space Needle is going to be destroyed, and she warns everybody. Well, later in the movie, they show her as an older woman. And the actress that plays her her name, she's known as Gay Rose. Her name is Gabriel Rose something. But anyway, for short, her IMDb is Gay Rose. And so it's Garo, like Garrow, who is the person that we've been referencing, Jurassic Liars. Anyway, I let him know about this. And he said, bro, that is so funny because when I was a kid, they would say my name wrong as a joke, and they would call me Gayro. Well, Gabriel Rose is the prophet. So kind of a Garrow connection, just kind of weird. Again, these things happen. We point them out. So here's the reference, and I talked about this a little while ago with Fakeologist. Pentagon planted Area 51 UFO conspiracy theory to hide weapons programs. So ignore their explanation for the why. We can't verify that's why they did it. That's their surface explanation. But I think that the existence of aliens is actually part of a worldview, a paradigm. It fulfills a certain role. It's replacing something archaic. They've replaced angels with aliens. They've replaced heaven and paradise with space and space communism. Verkjun says, in the new Final Destination, the safest person is living alone, isolated, never leaving her house. She dies as soon as visitors come, and she steps outside for a moment. The movie is pure hopelessness. Yes, it actually is. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good movie, but what they have done here is intriguing because this is an example of how these movies that are used to promote the psyops through predictive programming, foreshadowing, through pushing certain narratives and images ahead of time or at the same time, these movies will do it through the entire franchise, it seems, because they have tied together two disaster scenarios, 9/11 and something that hasn't happened yet. So the whole point of the movie is the Space Needle was doomed and she stopped it. Death retaliated by going after her or after the descendants of those survivors at the plane destruction. And this, again, happened right before 9/11. So the idea was this disaster was averted, but it never actually happened. It's still in the future. The prophecy is still yet to happen, and of course, we're waiting for it now. And that's why I was discussing the significance of the Space Needle opening up the Skyliner, just as the movie opens up with the Sky View having a grand opening. These are overlapping. We also, or if you look at the video on FakeOTube, if you missed it, Fakeologist played a trailer for the movie 0 Hour, which is about a blackout, about another significant destructive 9/11 style event. But what we were discussing today was largely how there seems to be this, well, there is, objectively speaking, there is a huge buildup towards a scenario. And as we're approaching it, things seem to be accelerating. So right now on my phone here, I'm watching Agenda Free TV. Los Angeles protests, National Guard in LA, 63,000 people watching. And all I see are Mexican flags and burning cop cars or SUVs. And it has me thinking back to what we were saying a few weeks ago. What does it mean? The Mexican naval ship hitting the Brooklyn Bridge and America dying. The person who died, the one of the two who died was named America. And we were just discussing what is the significance of this hitting the bridge, because we had talked about this in the context of the Francis Scott Key Bridge national anthem, another America reference, and how this tied into Leave the World Behind. It just seemed ominous at a minimum and less than random. And then I was pointing out the three pillars, the three masts that hit the bridge, seem to also correspond to the three masts of the Space Needle in the Final Destination movie, which has a similar scene of people falling, which is what we saw with the boat. Now, America dying, the boat, very much a Titanic metaphor. The three columns, I could be right about that. It does overlap with the Final Destination thing. It was a very Final Destination-esque accident at a minimum, but the imagery was pretty powerful. The Mexican flag, this collision, and I'm like, is this fortuitous? Is this some kind of omen, or is this foreshadowing some future psyop? And now the scenery is destruction of Los Angeles and a big Mexican flag and a clash between Trump, who is now being portrayed as a tyrant. In fact, in 0 Hour, they reference the president, George Marshall, or the ex-president in the movie, as a wannabe tyrant. Well, here is Trump about to celebrate his birthday with the military parade at the end of the week. Meanwhile, he's doing these deportations. Well, in 0 Hour, which I was just listening to on the trailer, because I haven't seen the whole thing, it talks about these human rights violations and people being kidnapped without warrant. Well, right now, Trump has the deportations, ICE agents fighting with people in LA. So you can see that overlap between 0 Hour and this political tyrant. And Trump, again, he has been represented this way. They pointed to the USDA and the big mural of his face. They said, oh, it's just like a dictator to put a big image of his face everywhere. So there's that build-up. And then we have the No Kings protests on his birthday, on Saturday. So there's a nationwide protest called No Kings, referencing Trump and Elon Musk, of course. But, as we're approaching this date of 6/11, it's interesting to see all this drama being stirred up. The protests, the riots, and, of course, this is what we expected. And one other point. The people who are being deported are seen as victims. This is like a martyr story. And Trump is being looked at as a authoritarian bully who is sending the Marines in and the National Guard in unnecessarily. So the other side does not support this. And he's threatening to arrest mayors, for example. So he's being portrayed a certain way. His birthday is coming up. It's being celebrated with a military parade. And the base just made the news. The group called the base, not Al-Qaeda, which Al-Qaeda, of course, means the base in Arabic, but no, the American version of Al-Qaeda, the white nationalist group that's training in paramilitary camps because they want to take advantage of societal chaos to establish a white ethno-state. In other words, Turner Diaries brought to life. And it seems like this is the perfect storm setup for this Turner Diaries 9/11 scenario happening as per this apparent script. So it was Snake Injustice who said, I just saw Mission Impossible. In a scene early on, there's a crowd of protesters. One has a sign with June 11th written on it at the 6-minute mark. Lean Dion posted this. From a Rick and Morty episode, they're hunting in a future wasteland. Turns out to be, quote, what's left of Seattle. And here's a shot of a damaged Space Needle. Roxy said, where did all those cops come from? Thousands. Well, there's this big military parade. It's the 250th anniversary of the military. And there's going to be 6,600 troops there. So there's a lot happening. We went over this in detail yesterday. Trump at the Kennedy Center. So Trump's going to be at the Kennedy Center on 6/11. So again, correlating the 6/11 scenario with the Trump head wound. And Kennedy is an association to the head wound. And then also remember he was shot at 6/11. So that these are things that are consistently being related. But what is interesting here in this picture, when we went over this yesterday, is he has his hands out, palms look red, same hue as the carpet, like stigmata, very Christ-like, but his face, his head, is superimposed over a gigantic bust of Kennedy's head. And so in context, we had Musk with the black eye next to the Lincoln head, and now here there's Trump. Again, the Christ pose, the stigmata, his head superimposed over the Kennedy's head. And again, this is looking to me like a build-up with the visuals, the graphics, the memes. So I talked about Mountainhead a little bit yesterday. I watched Mountainhead, and it's about AI causing problems throughout society, and it's causing groups to rise up in retaliation for imagined hate crimes because the generative AI is so powerful and there's no way to control it. And in the movie, the media is so desperate, things are so bad and bleak that they actually tell people, don't believe anything. Like they're basically telling the public to be skeptical, to auto-hoax. And I've been talking about this concept of fakeability for some time, that the general public is unaware of the sheer fakeability of events in general. And I was saying this before generative AI had been mainstream the way it is right now. So now it's just plainly obvious. But the fact of it is, it's not a new problem. We've already been deep-faked. But what they're doing now, and this is clever, is they're conditioning the public to see it as a problem. Like now it's a problem. You've already been deep-faked into the Disney universe, Planet Netflix. Everything is bent towards some worldview monopoly. Our entire worldview, we're in a Truman Show. So the idea that we're going to be deep-faked, it's like, that's useless. It's alarmism, but it ignores the fact that we're already there. We crossed that line a long time ago. But the reason why they're hyping up the threat is so that we acquiesce to censorship, which will allow them to maintain their worldview monopoly. And here's a great example of it. Donut is somebody I follow, the real Donut. He's on Twitter, DOENUT. So he created a video of using generative AI of Godzilla downtown Los Angeles alongside the rioters. And so it's funny, it goes kind of viral. But it says Godzilla video is triggering people and many people are calling for my channel to be shut down. Someone said, this channel needs to be taken down because it's a bunch of lies and it's going to keep us separated. I promise you this guy's being paid by the same people he's talking about. Let's see here. Nah, bruh, that's really Godzilla. Well, anyway, the point of it is he's triggering people with this video and people are saying this is bad, this needs to stop. Well, this is exactly what Mountainhead is about. Putting the brakes on the AI generation by the common people. We have to censor it because we can no longer tell real from fake. We've crossed this line. And so this is a made-up crisis because the public cannot tell real from fake. This has already been the case. It's been the case since maybe the atom bomb. Newsbenders really talks about this. They seized control over reality a long time ago. Ollie Goering says the semi-covert Aztlan agenda. Yeah, I heard some people yelling the La Raza thing. This idea that the Southwest, or pretty much the Western United States, rightfully belong to this former empire of Aztlan, and that this is the reconquest, that they're not invading, but that they're reclaiming, reconquering what was taken from them. And this is similar to the Tartarian thing. The idea that there was this advanced ancient civilization and it got wiped out by these newcomers. And this, now there's a book called I think it's The Cosmic Race. The guy who created the La Raza concept, I read it. and it involves Atlantis, Lemuria, and these various. It's influenced by Theosophy, but it's about this new race that's a mix of all the other races, and it's going to be the one that becomes the race of humanity, and everybody's going to basically merge. So the cosmic race. This book was published the same year as Mein Kampf. But anyway, that kind of sentiment is not new to me. I've looked into it before, and I do see a lot of it. So the idea that this land is under dispute is like not new here at all. Like there's just, to me, this is manufactured. Like that's all heavy propaganda. The fact that they have this, and the guy's document, the cosmic race was very racist. It was pretty bad actually. In fact, I think it talked about Atlanteans and Lemurians, and it suggested that Africans were descended from Lemurians who were egg-laying hermaphrodites. I mean, really weird stuff. I'll probably find that book and we'll dig into it. Sounds like fun. All right, let's move on. We are waiting for more news about Los Angeles. I'm just kind of watching from Agenda Free TV. And Agenda Free TV is a great channel. He covers this stuff live, but he doesn't know about media fakery and just assumes it's all real when it comes to a lot of these events. But this is a different situation because when you're dealing with street riots and protests, we're talking about situations that are staged, planned in advance, but there's a level of public participation. But this is voluntary. You know, the activists, the ones who are really woke about it. But in 2020, what made that different was we didn't have an opt-out. We had to participate. We had to put on the costume. We had to act the part for a time. But they paid us for it. You know, we got our crisis actor checks. They called them, was it STIMI checks? Who cares about Jared Leto? I really don't. But I heard about his cult. And so he's the next Russell Brand, Andrew Tate, another celebrity being accused by a host of women for being really bad at some point in the past. Well, that's what happens when you follow some guy who dresses like Jesus and he takes you to some isolated island. I'm not blaming the victims, but he modeled himself, apparently looks like off of the Manson cult. But he was apparently known by a lot of people for having predatory tendencies. And this is a bad pattern. We see it quite a bit where a lot of people turn a blind eye to these psychopaths for some reason. But what stood out to me here is that he calls his island Mars Island. So here, Jared Leto and his followers at his Mars Island retreat. We were talking about this yesterday, about the age of Horus being the age of Mars. And the age of Mars being synonymous with the new age. And so it's kind of interesting here. You have this Manson-esque scenario, and they're calling it Mars Island. Robert Heinlein, who wrote Stranger in a Strange Land, and he was part of that. I think he was part of some Laurel Canyon thing. He was also part of some book club that involved Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, the Manana Club or something. But he wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. And this is a theme here about this Martian who has this he has this belief system that is kind of like what you're seeing here with Jared Leto. But he's coming back down to earth to kind of show us this way of being. But it's kind of interesting how Mars has been used to project the perfect society. Red Star is the one I was referencing before, where it's about this commune. Well, no, it's a communist planet. They turn Mars, the red planet, into a communist planet. Red Star, it's like 1909. It's an old book. But Earth scientists go up there, they see how it works, and they bring it back here. Verkjan says, oh yes, the root races, like what H.P. Blavatsky wrote about in the books like The Secret Doctrine. That book is so dense and strange to read, like you have to be initiated to understand it. Well, there was something about that. We're talking about theosophy and these proto-New Agers. And they talked about this thing called the externalization of the hierarchy, where there would be some kind of revelation about who controls everything behind the scenes. Alice Bailey is the name here. She described it, where a group of evolved teachers, guides, and masters would manifest or show themselves in the world. So inner to outer manifestation. But this is the interesting part. According to Alice Bailey, the process involves stages. So we're talking about stages of humanity being collectively initiated into this new age. So we can all go to Mars Island. But listen to this. The year 2025 is when the hierarchy may set a date for the next stage of its externalization. So they had a meeting like 100 years ago, this Theosophist group, and they said that there would be this conclave, and it would coincide with the ages of Aquarius showing themselves on the earth. And the Aquarius has to do with the deluge, the flood of information. But anyway, it said the hierarchy is set for 2025. The stage of the forerunner, characterized by increased spiritual activity, and this will involve the visible presence of advanced spiritual beings. 2025 is a pivotal point for the next step in humanity's spiritual evolution and the outwardly manifestation of the hierarchy's influence. Interesting times. Jennifer Reeve says, didn't he climb the Empire State Building as a stunt? He may have. I think I only recall one movie with him. It was American Psycho. And he gets axed to death. But that's in the news. The Mars thing caught my eye. It's another scandal. Andrew Tate probably not getting clicks. Russell Brand not getting clicks. Russell Brand's going to get a pass, I think, because he has performed the necessary rituals. I think he's going to be in court starting like now. Like, I think Russell Brand's going to be in court quite a bit, which will take away from his church time. I followed this thread on Twitter where someone asked, is your life really better since your awakening? And I've been paying attention to this lately because I think this is intriguing here. How the people who are, quote, awake consistently report their lives being worse, everything being more stressful, scarier, how it's a burden to know what they know. It's kind of melodramatic. Alex Jones has played this up. But this idea here is that when you've become awake, you now know the world is run by reptilians and we're all manipulated and there's no escape. So you get the big picture, and now you have a new frame of reference through which to interpret reality. And that frame of reference is called critical consciousness. And so what's interesting to me, and I pointed this out before, is that the red pill awakening in many ways is similar to the left-wing woke, where woke is to be aware of systemic oppression and how there's this system in place that is oppressing us and we need to fight it. And most people are asleep to it, but we're awake. Now, everything you experience has to be processed through your awakening. So you have these parallel awakenings. And I've been noticing the similarities between the two because the people who are woke are aggrieved. They're angry. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. If you're not frothing at the mouth, you're not if you're not ready to go fight the government and run up the Capitol Hill, you're not a truther. If you don't have your AR-15 ready to fight the New World Order. So being awake has this implication of being an activist and having a level of readiness to fight the system. So again, their hearts are in the right place. But wokeism itself is inculcated into both fringes. And it's, in a way, it's like a steam valve, where some people are going to leave the middle, they're going to pay attention, and their indignation, their confusion, their cognitive dissonance, it's going to lead to something. So let's give them a scapegoat. Like, oh, you're right. The world is a little off. You were right, Neo. It was always fake. But this is the truth. And then when you see the truth, it's terrible. At least with the Matrix blue pill, you could eat steaks, you could have fun. The world was something you could enjoy. But the red pill is dreary. You're eating that pea soup, everybody's wearing rags, and you find out that everything's already been destroyed. So the awakening it's not even bittersweet, it's a bitter pill. And I've noticed that the woke people are just as miserable. The red pill woke are just as miserable as leftist wokes. So I'm going through the comments. So Eva here on Twitter has about 16,000 subs. And she says, is your life better since your awakening? So I'm going through the comments. Mine got worse, and it's calming down. It's been 4 years, and I'm having a hard time, and I must now isolate myself from society. And ironically, these are the anti-lockdown people, crying about isolation, social distancing, and masks, but now they're voluntarily isolated. Used to love the movies, now I can't stand them. Used to love concerts, can't stand them. This is believer in truth and justice and freedom. I used to have faith in institutions, no more. I used to think college was good, no. I used to believe in doctors, now I hate them. I used to have a large circle of friends, none. Family, don't speak. Now I only find joy in sun gazing. I don't wear sunblock and I don't take meds, I grow my own food. And I have an emergency stockpile of food and water. So this person stares at the sun and prepares for the end of the world. Eva says we have a ton in common. Now, these are comments of people who have taken the red pill awakening. And I went through here and it was a long, dreary thread. And I was responding to some of them. And I just remarked here that woke people are always miserable. That's the nature of wokeism. It's a sense of oppression. And Eva says this has nothing to do with being woke. Light Time says being woke and awakening are two different things, dude. Like, are they? Prove me wrong. And I've been describing this parallel for a long time. And I think the intention here is demoralization. So anybody who might be in a position or who might have the will to do something about what they see as some kind of mass injustice is going to be nullified, demoralized, and led in circles. All right, let's see here. Lord Laney says, those controlled op guys who harassed school shooting victims made it look crude and cruel, but I still kind of like that gonzo-esque gotcha-style journalism where you bum rush them. Yeah, I like that too, but I think the problem with their approach is they're going after the perceived victims, which makes them victimizers. And it's unconscionable, and it's low-hanging fruit, and nobody will believe you. So, crisis actors is not a conspiracy theory, but the people who hyper-focus on that, I think they're part of a limited hangout operation where they don't talk about who wrote their scripts. Like, forget the actors at the very bottom. Who wrote their scripts? How did they get the integration of law enforcement, DHS, hospitals, media on both sides of the political aisle to sign off on such an event? It's a big picture. So when you look at these psychological operations in isolation as anomalies, you're like, okay, that's a hoax or it's like a PR stunt. It's like, no, it's actually much bigger. Every one of these is much bigger. We're talking about psychological operations that would necessarily require the integration of government and media at a level at which they're supposedly not even in collusion. I mean, what clued me into this was simply, how come Armalite is paying $73 million over an obvious hoax? Do they not have the ability to see through it? We can see through it. Well, it's because both sides are, of course, part of the fakery. Andrea says, Leto was Angel Face in Fight Club. Okay. Now, Fight Club has this scene where they're talking about resetting the system and destroying everything. And the main character, Edward Norton's character, is discussing wrapping the columns of buildings in explosive gel. And as he's talking, right behind him are these two towers. I think it's Plaza City Twin Towers, the same architect that did the World Trade Center Twin Towers. And as he's talking about these, or about this Project Mayhem and wrapping the columns of buildings in this, or coating them in this explosive gel, they show these twin towers. And at the end of the movie, y'all probably remember the scene, the towers are all collapsing. But what's interesting is the explosive gelatin was referenced. Because leading up to 9/11, there was this art group staying in one of the towers called Gelatin B. And Gelatin B were producing some kind of art exhibit. And we never got to see it because it was going to be performed on 9/11/2001. Or 9/11/2001 was the exhibit. And it's just some dark joke to call it Gelatin B, which is my contention here. But if you look into that group, this mysterious art show they were preparing, it did involve setting up some platforms so they could have people on the outside of the tower. They had a helicopter shooting some footage. Calm Down says, it seems like the ICE protests in downtown LA, they want the protesters to start some shit, but it's just not happening like the OG LA riots. Well, it's been 33 years since the LA riots. And there may be some overlap here. And thinking about it now, in that context with LA riots, and then we recently had Tyree Nichols, whose death was compared specifically to Rodney King. And then we had Rodney Hinton Jr., and people made some notices. They noticed these names. I was pointing this out, but the Rodney Hinton Jr. story, that's the father who retaliated against a cop because his son was killed by the police in a questionable shooting from his perspective. But the cop that Rodney killed was born on 6/11, and he just served 33 years. So he was this retired deputy. But again, 6/11/33. That references Timothy McVeigh's execution, age 33, 6/11, and Trump's shooting at 6:11 p.m. and 33 seconds. And now here we are, 33 years from when Rodney King was, and you can look this up, Rodney King was hit with the baton 33 times over the course of 1 minute and 19 seconds. Ollie Goering says, IPS brand gummies called Gelatin B Yum. Hey, I could do that. I like that. I was just talking to Fakeologist about this before we were live, about how I'm looking for supplements that I can sell and other items. And I was trying to get B12 shots, and I wanted to be adrenochrome shots. All right, let's continue here. Calm Down says, if you remember, there was another event before Rodney King in Long Beach when the cops smashed that guy's face into a plate glass window. Well, the thing is, the Rodney King thing happened while James Cameron was filming Terminator 2. And the footage of the Rodney King beating was from the film that George Holliday was taking of Terminator. He was watching the Terminator being filmed. He was recording it as a bystander, walking home after watching a movie being filmed about an evil cop. He sees evil cops. So it's kind of interesting how you had this storyline here that kind of connects it. But James Cameron, if you ask me, it would be one of the main directors, behind the psy-opera that became the LA riots, the whole drama. The Rodney King beating was probably directed by James Cameron. I would even connect James Cameron, and we've already connected him, that movie, and Titanic to 9/11. It's all interrelated, but Avatar 2 paralleled the Cop City riots quite perfectly. And so the repeated theme with him is the West needs to fall, the class warfare, the Na'vi, the tree people need to fight the Marines who killed Gaia. In Cop City, the cops need to be opposed by the environmentalists. So his view is very anti-West, very much about the West sinking, which is why James Cameron filmed the Titanic, which has that as a metaphor. And that's why he was at the site of the sunken Titanic on 9/11/2001. It's all part of this metascript. These are the people who write our history. When I say metascript, I'm talking about history. There is a script that describes what's going to be reported on. We'll just say for the next 100 years. It's probably longer. But in broad strokes, So, for example, if we were looking at this meta script, let's say in 1968, it would be like, well, in 33 years, this is going to happen in New York. In 2020, this is going to happen in 20. So there's these bigger psyops that they have plenty of time to build up to. And that's where you have decades of predictive programming. And in this context, 9/11 was being destroyed in front of our eyes in many forms for decades before it happened. But what is interesting about right now is that Trump has been introduced to us in a myriad of characters since 1958. Tracked down with specificity. We're talking about a con man, they call him, building a wall, tapping into demagoguery, and getting arrested. Everything that happened to Trump. Tim and Vic 131 says Reagan assassination attempt happened on 3/30. Yep, John Hinckley Jr., who happened to have JFK's birthday, shoots Reagan and Brady, who died 33 years later of his head wound on August 4th. If you look at these dates and these numbers, you will see, as we're often pointing out with when JL calls in, there's some consistent storylines here that go back decades. So Trump himself, this person we see as Donald Trump, this character, has been presented to us in many ways. And it's not like we're piecing this together cherry picking. The writer of Back to the Future says Biff Tannen is Donald Trump. All right, let's see what else we have here. Now, the Reagan assassination, John Hinckley Jr., it has some elements of Jodie Foster, who was the person he was trying to impress, and that was a little girl that Robert De Niro saves in the movie. And Hinckley was dressing like De Niro leading up to that event. And that was obviously a staged event as well. There's a continuity here. And Robert De Niro has been very prevalent in this particular scenario. If we look at his role as Murray Franklin in the Joker movie, as Taxi Driver, the assassin, there's a lot of references to this throughout his work. Then we could even say Machete is a major one. And even this 0 Hour, where he plays, again, this role where he's embodying aspects of Trump, and on the world stage, he's Trump deranged. Deprogram Truth says, what's up with all the Trump charges and stuff like that? I'm assuming it all just goes away. Yeah, I remember thinking they made it 34 felonies because 33 would have been too obvious. Like 34 is the new 33. And I think they had to adjust it because of us. Cut by the Book says, I'm not refuting perspective, but do you see how the powers at B condemn the idea of being liberated and woke to the world around you? No, absolutely. Absolutely. They don't want a real awakening. What I'm saying here is that wokeism is a false awakening. The red pill is a false awakening. The woke ideology is a false awakening. Because both of these are built upon the presupposition that these various events that we're talking about, our shared history, are fundamentally real. And it matters that they're not. It matters that certain threats do not actually exist. It matters that certain scenarios are impossible. But it is absolutely the case that these awakenings are fake. The only people who can be said to be awake are those who've taken the off-world stage perspective. So, for example, the mainstreamers are dreaming, and it's a blissful dream. Like the Truman Show, before he started recognizing everybody was lying. But the woke people are having nightmares, so they're still asleep. We're the only ones that are awake. I mean, you can debate me on this, but if your fundamental worldview is infused with hyperstitions, lies, propaganda, and delusions, and you are detached from objective reality, and you have a literal belief in our shared consensus backdrop of history, even though we can prove that it's been highly manipulated, then you can't say that you're not a subjectivist. You can't say that you're, quote, awake. And it's not just about being able to say, oh, this is all fake. You have to be able to know how you know it's fake. Like, are you actually apprised of the use of fakery and psyops? So, no, if you don't have that, if you're not specifically deprogrammed, you are programmed by default. And anybody who's programmed cannot be said to be awake. And I was discussing this morning. I was painting and we were talking about this idea of being deprogrammed versus programmed, because everybody is born programmed. You go through it. There is no opt-out. But the difference here is active and passive consumption of information and media. Are you passively trusting what your sources are telling you, or are you actively refusing to believe? Because I take the stance of the informed non-believer. The stories that I say are fake are the stories that I'm the most informed about. The stories they say are real are the ones they've read the headlines from. They just accepted it. So when I say that we're the only ones who can claim to be objective, awake, I mean that quite literally. Like, for all intents and purposes, the IPS is essentially an Illuminati, in the sense of the Illuminati being the ones who've been shown the light while keeping everyone else in the dark, because we have assembled together enough information to see the division between the programmed and the programmers. And most of the programmers are not fully aware of the extent of the fakery. I think by design they're highly compartmentalized. It's safe to say Kate Perry knows space is fake, but does she know school shootings are fake? Probably not. So my point here is that these awakenings are all false. And another aspect to wokeism, and this applies to the red pill stuff as it does to any activist. Like, what's the difference between a soy boy, Antifa, and a Proud Boy? Both of them see their role as, now that we've taken this awakening, we've had this awakening, we must wake up the sleepers. So the red pillars want to hit the blue pillars and wake them up. And then you have another part of wokeism on the right where they're not really into the conspiracies, but they believe they've come to the conclusion over who runs the world. They call it the J pill, but it's an analogous belief system with a lot of overlapping. Yeah, Tim and Vic, if you want to hear me on Fakeologist, we had like 150 people in the chat. It was pretty active. I will send a link, but it's on FakeOTube. We talked about Mountainhead, 0 Hour, catch up of the last week or so. I mean, a lot has been happening, and I think this week's going to be eventful. I mean, if you look at the situation on the ground right now on the world stage, it is markedly different than it was a month ago. You know, Trump and Musk splitting up and all the stuff that's been happening. But everything has been an escalation right out of the madness. And check this out. The first trailer for Call of Duty Black Ops 7 has come out. So these video game releases often relate to what's happening on the world stage. So I'm trying to figure out what this one's about. I haven't played the game. Initial confirmation. Welcome to 2035. Prepare for the most mind-bending Black Ops. So here it is. Embrace the madness. So embrace the madness. The madness, again, references Disease X. Mountainhead is about the madness. The AI-generated content causing people to go crazy. So Call of Duty Black Ops 7 brings players to the most mind-bending Black Ops ever. The year is 2035. The world is on the brink of chaos, ravaged by conflict and psychological warfare. Wielding cutting-edge technology, David Mason must fight back against the manipulative enemy who weaponizes fear above all else. So it's about psychological warfare, embrace the madness, weaponizing fear. Very interesting. Now this was just posted today. I haven't seen anybody play that game or talk about it yet, but we'll follow up. All right, let's move on. I'm going to go through my tweets. You can find me at IPS Think Tank on Twitter. Tim and Vic says, I was hoping Lynn would talk about the Brooklyn Bridge. Well, the Brooklyn Bridge thing to me, and it was like a training ship, I think it was all a hoax. I really do. I don't have confirmation, but someone said that it was cut off 33 feet from the top of the masts. By the way, Trump and Mark Rubio both tripped on the way up the stairs of Air Force One. I don't know if that means anything. So here's Trump. He says, we're going to have troops everywhere.
Even if you don't plan to invoke the Insurrection Act, you plan to send troops to Los Angeles? What? Even if you're not planning to invoke the Insurrection Act, you still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart.
We're not going to let our country be torn apart. We're going to have troops everywhere. And this was shared by the Tennessee Hauler, who says, welcome to authoritarianism. ICE protests in Compton. Again, burning cars. Chaos. Los Angeles looking like a collapsed third world country under Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom's lack of leadership. Absolute madness. And here's a couple burning cars. Now, this is fake here. I saw the white car. This one looks like it's from 2020. You have to be... Like, I saw a few videos where people are trying to recycle stuff. Protesters at the LA Federal Detention Center, members of California National Guard and their families are going to die, is what they're saying. So threats. Now, this is a great example of Mountainhead. So this account, Jay Mayers, let me see his channel size. He is obviously engagement farming. He got 1 million hits. So that probably bought him a tank of gas. I mean, what does 1 million hits get you if you monetize it? But what has he done here? This is no different than Mountainhead. He didn't generate this, but he just recontextualized some footage from 5 years ago, and it spread to 1 million people, and 1 million people are now saying, okay, we got to do something about Governor Newsom. You see, so it inflames passions. People get angry, and it's fake. The essence of skepticism is suspension of judgment. So instead of seeing this and reacting, okay, I'm super mad now, or I'm super happy and vindicated now, you would say, well, let me hold back and wait and make sure it's real before I tap into it emotionally. Verkjon says, I just watched In the Mouth of Madness. It's about a novelist's book becoming reality. Yeah, that was my favorite movie for a long time. I think I've watched it 7 or 8 times. It's John Carpenter. It's a documentary, just like They Live. And what I like about that in particular, though, is Sutter Kane stands for the metascriptors, the monolith, his typewriter. And what he writes becomes real. But it's about his books changing the entire world because it is the filter through which everyone perceives reality. And everybody goes through it. Everybody's crazy except for him. And so ironically, at the end, he's in the padded cell. And that's like us. You see, we are looking at a world gone mad, and we're the outliers for noticing it. And at the end of the movie, he's eating popcorn, watching his life on the screen as a movie. It gets very meta. But In the Mouth of Madness is a pretty good description how a media monopoly allows any person or entity to dictate how reality essentially manifests. Well, that's interesting. Somebody had taken a picture of a burning American flag, and you see a face in the fire. We don't have any real martyrs yet. I saw somebody saying there's going to be a Jorge Floyd, but I don't think they need a singular martyr. I think they have a class of martyrs. Like this, to me, has the potential to be as inflammatory as 2020, especially now that Trump is aggressive here. I mean, look at this here. A once great American city, Los Angeles has been invaded and occupied by illegal alien criminals. Now, violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try to stop our deportation operations. But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I'm directing Homeland Security, Secretary of Defense, and Attorney General in coordination with other departments and agencies to take all necessary action to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to the migrant riots. Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free. I mean, that's pretty inflammatory right there. And then he's unleashing these soldiers, the National Guard, and this is not looked upon favorably by the other side. And to me, it looks like it's needlessly incendiary. And then you have the dramatic footage here of National Guard firing non-lethal munitions, but the imagery of it is pretty powerful.
We're going to move back. We're going to stay at a safe distance. So what you saw there, that was...
Now, we'll play more of this later. I don't want to spend too much time. Here's the Black Ops. I'm not going to play the trailer. Black Ops 7, it was just released, but psychological warfare. Rebel Black said, could that be a crisis baby? We can't believe anything anymore. I'm with him on this. I see a mother with using a this is 100% propaganda. She's using a Mexican flag to wipe the tear gas from the eyes of her baby. This is pathetic. This is agitprop. I mean, this is pure symbolism. Does anybody believe this is real? Would you use a Mexican flag to wipe tear gas from the eyes of a baby? No. No. This is 100%, in my view. It's either A, it's child abuse, or it's staged, and it's still kind of child abuse. I think this is fake. Regardless, it's a crisis baby. CNN says they're each carrying large sticks and a rifle. Each of them are carrying a rifle, and they appear to be lethal. We don't know the status of what these weapons are. National Guard on the ground in L.A. after Trump's deployment order. And yeah, they're all carrying these big staves along with their carbines. I don't know. Lev Parn says, my sources say Trump's National Guard move in L.A. is not only revenge, but it's tied to a larger plan for June 14th, with the protests scheduled all across the country. So again, on the 14th, Flag Day, Donald Trump's birthday, the military's birthday, there are protests called No Kings. Here's a new development. This computer operates using human brain cells derived from blood samples. So this is a computer that uses blood.
We grow real biological neurons into networks onto computer chips.
It sounds like science fiction, but Hans says the CL1 is capable of learning and adapting faster than standard silicon-based AI, while consuming significantly less energy.
We take blood or skin and we can transform them into stem cells, and from stem cells into brain cells or neurons that we then use them for
blood to stem cells to neurons to computer chips, biological fusion here. This is an interesting and somewhat disturbing development, and it reminds me of, it's comparable to Astrocrete. When I learned that NASA has this plan to mix blood with moon dust and Mars dust to make a stronger form of concrete. But yeah, here you'll just give some blood to your computer and it will come to life or something. This is definitely crossing some line here. Calm Down says that IRT Media is a good channel covering the downtown LA situation. Okay. Yeah, I'll be following it for sure. I like to follow stuff like after the fact a little bit, because real time, you can't really vet everything. You need time to ask Grok. Calm Down says you got to be dumb as S to take a baby to a protest. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just an attempt to get sympathy. They did this in 2020, where crazies were bringing their children, and the children would be there crying, and they'd say, "Look what you did, Donald Trump," or "Look what you did, right wingers." And it's like, no, you did that. You're a terrible mother, bringing your kid to a protest. AnxG says, have you ever been to the war zone part of Albuquerque? Yeah, I used to live there. I lived there for a few years. I abandoned my phone after some things, and I spent some time mostly selling art. But yes. And I think it looks worse than it is. I think it looks shocking. In fact, it looks terrible a lot of times. But I don't think it's as bad as it looks. I mean, actually, it kind of is. I mean, there are these, for some reason, there's a lot of people getting shot and that kind of thing. I never felt threatened, but I just knew what times of day to avoid certain places. But yeah, it's kind of a mess. They've concentrated a lot of the chaos in that area. They put a lot of speed bumps up, and they've managed to corral certain crimes to that area. But I mean, Albuquerque's safe. You just got to stay north of certain streets, and don't go to gas stations after sunset. I had a friend who was doing jury duty, and I learned that, yeah, if you want to reduce your chance of getting killed pointlessly, don't go to the gas station after dark. But I worked for the morgue here off and on, doing decedent transport. And so I had a little more insight, because I knew that we have this reputation. It's the 9th most dangerous city in the country, they say. But from my experience, most of the deaths are basically just, they go with the jobs. They go with the lifestyle. It's like gang members killing gang members. Like, if you're not involved in that, it's not going to affect you. So I just think it looks worse than it is. Like, Breaking Bad isn't really a documentary. Although there was a lot of that. One of the things that we frequently dealt with were, people dying from meth labs exploding. In fact, I had picked up one person whose hands were blown off. His ears were blown off. I had to fix that for a pre-cremation viewing. And I did a great job with it, to be honest, with what I had to work with. Luckily, I mean, it is what it is. It's a mess, but those things are just fundamentally dangerous. And at the time, they had said that they were busting like 60 of these meth labs every month. It was incredible. And I was trying to get into the business of cleaning up after these things, but it's just way too dangerous. I did do suicide homicide cleanup. I did clean up after decoms and stuff, but I never got into the cleaning up after a lab like that, because I didn't want to deal with any of these dangerous concoctions. And, when I drive around, sometimes I see the meth RV. Breaking Bad has a guided tour. So you have the Breaking Bad RV where they were making the stuff, and they actually have a replica of it, and they do a tour. And there's this family that lives at one of Walter White's houses, and they have a sign out front that basically says, "Don't disturb us when you're taking your pictures and your selfies." All right, let's see what else we have here. Going through your comments. Tim and Vic says, on 11/9, NBC News reported that lawyers ordered to find migrant families separated by the Trump admin said they haven't tracked down the parents of 666 kids. Calm Down says, every mortician I've ever met was goth. Has that been your experience? No, most of the people I worked with were the children of the people who owned the thing, whose parents started it. A lot of these things were family businesses. And a lot of the people that I worked with were mostly people looking for side jobs, picking up at night. And I did have this task when I was working for the medical investigators. Well, I wasn't working for them directly, but for the ambulance company that had the dead body contract. One of my jobs was to help vet potential new hires by taking them over to the morgue and into the reefer so they could, get an idea, can you really do this job? And they asked me to take this one particular individual who was, I wouldn't call him goth, but he was covered in like satanic death metal tattoos, and he was some kind of a horror core rapper, like ICP, but more violent. And I thought, surely this guy will love this job. You know, he raps about it, talks about it, wears the shirts, you know, the skulls and stuff. And no, he did not have a stomach for dealing with all the bodies. And I saw this a couple of times. I did see it a couple of times. Like, having a morbid aesthetic does not inoculate you against the reality of it. Okay, let's see what else we have here. I'm going through my Twitter feed, and you know, I'm pretty sure that anytime you see some OnlyFans model being spammed on your account, it's AI. People are generating these things. You can't trust anything. They've deep-faked that entire industry. Who knows how many of them are completely made up? You know how many of them advertise with fake stories? Like, this teacher has been exposed. She's actually an OnlyFans. It's like, I've seen plenty of these. These got to be PR stunts, if not totally fake. If only that Hawk Tuah girl was AI. Okay, I think we're going to open up phones if anybody has anything to add here. There's going to be some kind of a, not a marathon, but we're going to be live morning and evening on 6/11. And most of you here are pretty much aware of what 6/11 is, the significance of it, and why we're looking at it with great interest. Uki says Tim got scammed. No, it's not that I got scammed. It's that I've been following a lot of these channels on how to build AI avatars and bots and what they call faceless YouTube accounts. So if you go into any of these tutorials on YouTube, it's all about faceless accounts. And what they're doing now is they're creating just from scratch entire characters, and they're so realistic, there's no telling. There is no way to know the difference. And it wouldn't shock me. It's out of control. And I'm pretty sure every single event that they want a consensus on, they're building it now almost purely by AI. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and head out here. I have a few other things to do. We're going to be in the Discord server. So if you're in the post section on my account, there's a link. You can go ahead and join the Discord server. We'll be in voice chat. We're going to be compiling our information here. I'm trying to turn the Discord into an auxiliary research, and there's been a lot of great posts lately. So again, if you want to be involved in Discord and you're a member, just go to posts, and I just posted a link a little while ago. Subscribe to the newsletter. Go to, I'll put a link below, it's the Substack, and here you get live stream notifications and video archives, as well as newsletters and other relevant information. So there's a link right there. If you're not subscribed, I suggest you do. And thanks for all of your comments. I'm going to send a link to the talk I had with Fakeologist. It was just kind of a catch-up of the last week and kind of setting the stage for what we're expecting. In fact, here's a link. I'll just go ahead and pin it on my account. What we're expecting for Wednesday and why we think it's highly significant. And I'm trying to find, I can't find it right now, no big deal. I have a couple of other links to share. I'll try to compile everything. Subscribe to the newsletter. I have a very lengthy newsletter, all setting the stage for 6/11. I've been using AI to compile a lot of this stuff. So I just want to have everyone on the same sheet, because it should be fun. I mean, I'm not looking at this apprehension. I'm not crying wolf. I'm not warning people about the end of the world. I'm like, grab your popcorn. This should be good. So this is Chief Crow, Auto Hoax, or GTFO.